Eddie had never been one for adventure. He preferred a simple life, working his low-key job as a pizza delivery guy at Tony's Pizza Palace. The joint was old, the pizza oven was barely working, and the boss, Tony, was always barking about customer complaints. But hey, it paid the bills, and the tips weren't terrible. That afternoon, as Eddie slouched behind the counter, scrolling through his phone, Tony burst through the kitchen door holding a shiny new GPS device. "Eddie, check this out. We got a new delivery system. High-tech stuff. This'll put us ahead of Domino's for sure," Tony said, thrusting the gadget into Eddie's hands.
Wow.
Eddie glanced at the GPS, sleek, black, and glowing with strange blue lights. The screen blinked to life with a single word flashing. "Ready." "Where'd you get this, Tony?" Eddie asked, flipping it over, searching for a logo. "Some company online. Cheap too. Said it guarantees the fastest delivery times ever." Eddie wasn't impressed, but as long as it made deliveries easier, why not? The moment the device was in his hands, the GPS beeped loudly, and a new order popped up. 1 large pepperoni pizza, 112 Maple Street. Eddie sighed, stuffed the pizza in his thermal bag, and hopped on his beat-up scooter. He punched in the address, and the GPS screen flashed. "Proceed to destination." The ride begins. It wasn't long into the ride when things started to get weird. The GPS told him to take a turn down a narrow dirt road he'd never seen before. Eddie raised an eyebrow. "Maple Street? This is more like creepy horror movie street," he muttered, but shrugged and kept going. After all, he trusted technology, right? The dirt road stretched endlessly, the trees growing thicker, the air cooler. Eddie squinted at the GPS. The screen flickered, and suddenly the text changed. "Time to delivery, 65 million years." What the heck? Eddie slammed on the brakes. But before he could react, the ground beneath his scooter rumbled. The sky, once clear, now swirled with dark clouds. In an instant, the world seemed to twist, colors blurred, and Eddie felt as if he was being pulled through a vortex. The GPS beeped wildly. "Dinosaurs and a pizza guy." Eddie blinked, his vision adjusting to the bright sunlight. Except, it wasn't the same sunlight. His scooter had vanished, and around him stood giant ferns, towering trees, and in the distance. Was that a dinosaur? "No way," Eddie whispered, heart pounding in disbelief. A Tyrannosaurus Rex, in all its terrifying glory, stomped across the landscape, sending the ground shaking with every step. Okay, this is a dream. Maybe I fell asleep at the counter." "Yeah, that's it," Eddie told himself. But when the T-Rex let out a bone-rattling roar, he was pretty sure this wasn't a dream. Eddie glanced down at the GPS. It beeped again. "Deliver pizza to customer. ETA, 3 minutes. 3 minutes." Eddie yelped. He still had the pizza, clutched in his bag like it was going to save his life. Frantically, Eddie dashed through the prehistoric jungle, dodging ferns and ducking under fallen trees. The T-Rex roared again, its giant footsteps closing in behind him. Eddie wasn't about to become a dinosaur's lunch. The dinosaur chase. With the T-Rex hot on his trail, Eddie bolted into a clearing, heart racing as the massive creature stomped closer. He scrambled up a rocky hill, pizza bag swinging wildly. For some reason, the GPS still insisted he was close to his destination. "Who orders a pizza in the dinosaur age?" he groaned, slipping over loose rocks as the T-Rex's thunderous footsteps closed in. As the beast roared again, Eddie spotted a dark cave up ahead. With a burst of adrenaline, he sprinted towards it, diving inside just as the T-Rex's jaws snapped shut behind him. Inside the cave, it was eerily silent. Eddie sat against the stone wall, panting, his pizza bag somehow still intact. He pulled out the GPS, which now displayed a new message. "Order received. Deliver to unknown." "Oh, great. Just what I need," Eddie said sarcastically, catching his breath. He fumbled with the GPS, trying to figure out how to get back. His fingers brushed across the screen, and it flickered to life again. Suddenly, Eddie noticed something odd at the back of the cave. There, half hidden under a pile of stones, was another pizza delivery bag. Old, dusty, but unmistakable. A pizza delivery logo from a different company. "What the heck?" Eddie muttered, picking up the bag. He opened it cautiously, revealing a fossilized pizza inside. "No way. I'm not the first one." As Eddie stared at the ancient pizza, trying to wrap his head around what had just happened, the GPS beeped again, this time displaying a countdown. "Time to next delivery. 10 seconds. Next delivery? Eddie exclaimed. But before he could react, the cave began to swirl. The world twisted around him, just like before, and Eddie was pulled into another vortex of colors and light. In a blink, Eddie was gone from the prehistoric world, the pizza bag still in hand. Eddie landed hard, the world spinning around him as he tumbled to the ground. For a second, he lay there, trying to gather his thoughts. The last thing he remembered was being chased by a T-Rex. And now, where was he? He slowly sat up, looking around. Instead of towering ferns and dinosaurs, Eddie found himself surrounded by buildings. But something was off. These weren't the skyscrapers of the modern world. No, these were medieval-looking stone structures, with straw rooftops and narrow streets filled with people in strange clothing. "Oh no," Eddie groaned, picking up his pizza bag. "Please tell me I'm not in the Middle Ages." His GPS beeped, and the screen flashed. Delivery to King Arthur's Castle. Time remaining, 5 minutes. "What?" Eddie exclaimed, staring at the screen. "King Arthur? That couldn't be right." Before he had time to process, a man in armor galloped up on horseback. The knight looked down at Eddie, eyes narrowing. "Are you the pizza boy from the stars?" the knight asked, his voice thick with authority. Maybe," Eddie said, still unsure if this was real or just some weird fever dream. "You must come with me. The king awaits his delivery." The knight leaned down, offering Eddie a hand. "King Arthur orders pizza now? I thought he'd be more of a turkey leg guy," Eddie muttered. But he climbed onto the horse nonetheless, clutching his pizza bag as the knight galloped through the cobbled streets. The royal pizza order. Before Eddie knew it, they arrived at a massive stone castle, its towers rising into the sky. Eddie had seen movies about King Arthur, but nothing prepared him for actually standing in front of the legendary fortress. The knight led Eddie through the gates, past curious onlookers, and into the great hall. There, seated on a massive throne, was King Arthur himself, surrounded by knights in shining armor. Eddie swallowed hard as he approached the king, holding the pizza bag awkwardly. "Your pizza, Your Majesty," Eddie stammered, bowing slightly as he opened the bag. The smell of hot pepperoni filled the air, and King Arthur's eyes lit up. The prophecy was true. The boy from the future brings the meal of the gods," Arthur declared dramatically. Eddie just stood there, unsure of what to say. He watched as the king and his knights dug into the pizza, their faces lighting up with joy. "This is the finest feast we have ever tasted," Sir Lancelot exclaimed between mouthfuls. "What is this round bread called?" Pizza," Eddie replied, still not believing what he was seeing. But before he could bask in the absurdity of the situation, his GPS beeped again. The screen flashed urgently. "New delivery in 1 minute. Prepare for time jump." "Seriously? Another one?" Eddie muttered, but he didn't have time to argue. The world around him began to warp again, the castle and knights fading into a blur as Eddie was pulled into another time vortex. Lost in the Wild West, Eddie landed face first in the dirt this time. He spat out a mouthful of dust and looked around. Gone were the stone walls of King Arthur's castle. In their place stood a rickety old saloon, dusty streets, and wooden storefronts. The smell of horses and the sound of a harmonica filled the air. Of course, the Wild West, Eddie said to himself, wiping off his clothes. The GPS beeped again, and Eddie's heart sank. The screen flashed. Next delivery, the sheriff's office. "Well, at least it's not a dinosaur this time," Eddie grumbled as he made his way through the dusty street. A tumbleweed blew by, and Eddie found himself in front of a weathered wooden building with a sign that read, "Sheriff." He stepped inside to find a burly sheriff sitting behind a desk, twirling a toothpick in his mouth. A couple of outlaws were locked up in the cells, shooting Eddie dirty looks. "You the pizza man?" the sheriff asked, raising an eyebrow. Eddie nodded, holding up the pizza bag. "Yeah. You ordered a large pepperoni?" The sheriff grinned. "Best meal I'll have all month." He slapped a few gold coins on the table as Eddie handed him the pizza. Eddie watched in disbelief as the sheriff tore into the pizza, all the while ignoring the glares from the outlaws who clearly hadn't been offered a slice. Eddie glanced at the GPS again, hoping this would be his last stop. But no, the screen blinked. "Prepare for next jump." Come on," Eddie shouted, just as the world twisted again, and he was yanked into the time stream once more. The future, a tech dystopia. This time, Eddie landed with a thud on cold, metallic ground. As he looked up, he realized he wasn't outside anymore. The buildings around him were sleek and towering, made of metal and glass. Hovering cars zipped by overhead, and robots marched down the streets. Eddie took a deep breath, glancing around. The sky was filled with glowing billboards advertising things he couldn't even begin to understand. Welcome to Neo City, year 2134, one sign read. Great, the future. Just what I needed, Eddie muttered sarcastically, clutching his pizza bag. He checked the GPS, delivery to AI Master Control. ETA, 2 minutes. AI? Am I delivering pizza to a robot now? Eddie hurried down the streets, dodging robots and future tech as he made his way to the tallest building in the city. As he approached the massive structure, a robotic voice echoed through the air. Pizza delivery detected. Welcome, human. Please proceed to Master Control. A door slid open, and Eddie found himself in a high-tech elevator. Before he knew it, he was standing in front of a giant screen with a glowing, pulsating orb in the center. The orb flickered, and a voice boomed through the speakers. You have brought the sustenance. Yeah, here's your pizza, Eddie said, holding up the bag. The orb flashed brightly. The humans of the past understood the true art of cuisine. Thank you for this relic of flavor. Eddie stood there, completely bewildered. But before he could even react, the GPS beeped one final time. This time, the screen flashed, returning to home base. Eddie felt the familiar pull as the world around him twisted and turned. Before he knew it, he was back at Tony's Pizza Palace, standing behind the counter. His scooter was parked outside like nothing had happened. He blinked, staring at the GPS, which was now completely off. Tony emerged from the back, wiping his hands on his apron. How was the delivery, Eddie? Everything go smooth? Tony asked. Eddie just stood there, mouth agape. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. As Eddie walked out of the pizzeria, he glanced back at the GPS, still unsure if he'd really traveled through time or if it was all some crazy dream. But one thing was certain, this was the most exciting pizza delivery job he'd ever had. What do you think? Is it cool to be a time traveler pizza delivery guy?